Hello. We should be live and going. If you're joining us, please let me know if you can hear me. Please let me know if you can see me. I don't want to record live to an empty room, no sound. I'm traumatized from that one time that I've done that. So double check, push it in, make sure you can hear me. Hello. Let's start over. Tonight we're going to talk about Thanksgiving. And if you're American, you may be thinking this is super early. But if you're Canadian, you know that that's just next month for us because we celebrate in October. So I figured it was a good time to kind of bring it up. And I don't think anybody really knows what's going to happen. At least here in Ontario, we're seeing COVID cases like ramp up again. And they're talking about lowering gathering limits, and of course there's always like that fear of like the second wave and another lockdown. So hopefully we don't get there. Hopefully we're able to like connect with our families and do Thanksgiving and celebrate together, but we don't really know until the time comes. So as I go through things, kind of like always, I'm not able to really make it specific when I'm talking to a group. So if there's anything that you're worried about or a specific scenario that you're like experiencing in your life and you want to talk about that, feel free to comment. Feel free to ask me because I'm happy to divert and like answer direct questions and things. So just know that, like I said, it's can't be personalized and tailored to everybody's like situation because I don't know your situation, and it's going to be kind of general, and you might be able to use some ideas and some not so much. It's going to just depend on you and where you are and your family. So I'm going to go through them. Again, if you have questions, let me know and I'll answer them as we go. So this is a big one. Number one is to make sure to tell people that you're vegan. And this is something that a lot of new vegans, like, they don't do, right? Like, they skip out on, and then they try and like navigate a new world of veganism, and they go to, people's houses or events or just out, and nobody knows. So it's really awkward. It's really hard. And it kind of ends up with you being hungry or uncomfortable or feeling a little bit resentful even, if you're going somewhere and you're like, I can't eat any of it. There's bacon on this and there's this on that, and it's really normal to other people. But when you start kind of looking through another lens, it's difficult. So step one, if you're new, I know a lot of us in this group kind of came vegan during the pandemic, right? Like, it's been part of that journey. So if you're facing like a Thanksgiving with family and you haven't told them yet, do that now. Have that conversation. And depending on what your Thanksgiving traditions are, right? Maybe you do it at your parents' house or an aunt's house. Try and connect with the host and just say like, hey, I'm actually eating a plant-based diet now. And personally, I found with clients, when you're kind of introducing that topic for the first time, it's really helpful to make it very like you focused. So people are going to have questions. They're going to want to know why, and they're going to think maybe that it's weird that you're vegan now, and like, how can you have Thanksgiving without turkey or whatever, right? There's always kind of those like pre-programmed responses, and it's really helpful to kind of say to people like, I feel better eating this way. Like, this is for me, and make it very personal, because if you connect it to things like animals or the environment, people take that right away as you criticizing their choice, even if you're not, and that's not what you're meant to be, and you're super passionate about those things. It's not the best way to introduce it to the family. I think you can talk about those things and you can dig deep once they kind of get over that like initial shock and surprise, right? For some people, it's so different from what they're used to, that it's a lot easier to kind of push back and be like, well, that's silly and that's not going to work, and this and that. But when you make it about you, there's less defense. So number one, if this is a new thing and you haven't told people, tell them. And if you don't feel comfortable, maybe you're going somewhere and you don't really know the host that well, maybe connect with someone else that does, right? Maybe it's your aunt that hosts it, for example, but you're really close with your cousin and you feel more comfortable talking to your cousin about that, right? Like, find that connection and make sure that somebody knows, because you can't go to a big like family event that's centered around eating and not tell anybody, right? Like it's just not going to be a good time. So start there. The next thing is like, see, these are kind of the next kind of few tips are going to be for if you're eating at somebody's house. And then we'll kind of come back and talk a little bit about if you're hosting, like what are some options, some things to consider. And again, if you have questions as we go through this, or something doesn't make sense, or you have a really specific scenario like you're imagining or dreading, tell me and we can like talk through that and I can give you some suggestions. So again, if this is new and maybe you've just told your host, I'm vegan, and they're freaking out. There's a pandemic. What do you mean? Like I make a turkey and now you want me to find like obscure, I don't know, quinoa. I can't afford quinoa. I can't put quinoa on everything, right? Like people have this like quinoa focus, right? And your host is freaking out. So offer to bring your own food. And that can be kind of weird in the beginning. And I don't think it's a long-term solution. Like it depends on your family dynamics. But typically the easiest thing that you can do to kind of relieve, right? Like that tension, that overwhelm, that shock is to say like, don't even worry about it. I'm going to bring some of my own stuff and I'm going to be here. I'm going to be with you guys. I'm going to enjoy it and just kind of take that off of the host. And, you know, sometimes like people prefer that, right? They don't want to think about it. They don't want to change what they're doing. And that's really simple and really easy. And that's something that I always offer to do even now. Like I'm 7 years in. And if I'm going to somebody's house, I always offer like, can I bring anything? Do you want me to bring anything for me? And especially if it's like a new person, like a new friend, or maybe I've not eaten at somebody's house before. Like I tell them I'm vegan and I offer to bring something. More often than not, people say, no, don't worry about it. You know, we got this. And sometimes people say, yeah, you know what, that would be really good, because it's already a lot to host a big family meal, but then to kind of be sprung on or surprised by like a dietary restriction can make it even bigger. And, you know, often when people like, if they don't really know you that well, especially, right? And you're kind of dropping that bomb on them, right? They've invited you with no idea that you're not going to eat what maybe they've already determined they're going to make. So that can ease the burden. And that's a really good kind of go-to offer when you're first kind of introducing it to anybody for any event. You can bring your own. Most of the time people don't like that. They're like, no, like, you know, just tell me what you want, or tell me what you would eat, or if they want to have that conversation. And so the next best thing that you could do is ask that they take out, you know, when they're prepping, like for example, mashed potatoes. Be like, can you just take out a few of those boiled potatoes and set them on the side before you add milk and dairy? And a lot of the times, like Thanksgiving food, right? Like, sure, there's like a big turkey or ham. Maybe you do fish. You know, I don't know what your tradition is, but there's these meat dishes, but there's a lot of veggie sides, and some of them may be accidentally vegan, or, you know, most of the stuff that gets added on isn't until later in the cooking process. So you can kind of scoop those out, and that's something that I've done. You know, my father-in-law, when they've hosted Thanksgiving and stuff for a lot of years, and that's kind of just pulled out boiled potatoes and carrots and all those different things, and let me season them on my own while they add maybe butter or cheese, like whatever it is that they prefer and how they like to prep it. And last year they actually surprised me and like had a vegan pumpkin pie and like vegan salad dressing, and really kind of like went the extra mile, and that was really nice for them to do that. But like, you know, I guess the point is I've always made it really simple, because it doesn't need to be complicated. Someone doesn't need to completely prep a different meal just because you're not eating animal products. So do a scoop out, bring your own butter or your own seasonings, and then that also feels more comfortable because you're still eating what everyone else is, and it doesn't like alienate you or kind of like separate you from the group because everybody else is eating it. You're just skipping like the turkey on your plate. So if that, you know, depending on your host, some hosts really, they want to be good hosts, right? Maybe they didn't expect this and they want to go further with it, and they want to go like that extra mile. And one thing that you can offer to do is like help them prep the sides, right? Maybe they're like, no, like I want to make sure that you have great options. I want to make sure you have a protein. I want to make sure you have this, this, and this. And that's great, and I love to see that enthusiasm, but we also don't need to make it so people are inventing like a whole new meal, because that's a lot, right? So one thing you can do is say like, oh, I know you always make garlic beans. Maybe this year we can swap out the butter for an olive oil or a plant-based butter. And it's going to taste very similar. The process isn't going to be that much different, but then you don't have to worry about, well, what's the vegan dishes and what's the not. And, you know, keep it simple, keep it basic. Same for like mashed potatoes, like all of those things you can kind of like tweak just a little bit and make something vegan. I have never done, I don't know, was it yams that they do with the marshmallows? Or sweet potatoes. I've never had that dish. I've never had it served anywhere, but I know that that's like a big thing for people. And you could get vegan marshmallows, right? Like it doesn't have to be, and like they're good. They're marshmallows, right? They're sugary, they're sweet. I don't know that melted in anything you would know a difference. So there's definitely things you can do and swap. Like if you have a host that's like super eager and like willing to try something new and kind of like get on board with you, and say like, go for it. And help them do it though, if they're willing to let you kind of dive in and do that. And it also gives you a bit of confidence to know that you know what you're getting, because a lot of times people have like, you know, your best interests at heart and they're really trying, but like they don't quite understand something, or they don't realize, you know, that veganism is anything more than like just meat. So I would also like add that into your, hey, I'm vegan combo, and make sure that they understand what that means. And you don't have to get, you know, you don't have to pull out a list of like, these are all my, you know, not approved foods or something. Just make sure that they kind of get the idea of what that means and what that looks like. And, you know, things happen. It's not always going to be perfect. But, you know, do your best. And if you're involved, that's a great way to handle it, right? So we've gone through a lot of points so far. Like I said, if there's a scenario coming up, let me know. Or if there's anything that doesn't make sense or it doesn't seem practical, call me out, tell me. Okay, so the next one would be potlucks. And potlucks can be kind of easy because you're bringing your own dish, and everybody has their own dish, and you know for sure that your food is going to be vegan, and it's not where everybody has something a little different on their plate. It's a little bit more relaxed. So what I would suggest, make a big serving. There's a good chance people are going to be like, oh, what's this vegan thing you brought? Like, that's gross. And, you know, you might have a few that are courageous and try it and go, oh, it's not that bad, or whatever. But along with your dish, I'd also bring a dessert, because most of the time vegan desserts look so similar to the non-vegan kind of counterparts. They smell the same, they taste the same, and it's a great way to like win people over. You gotta like get it in there and go, oh, like these vegan cookies, like they're not so bad, or like, oh, I guess I could have another one of those, right? Like there's this weird like attitude of like, I guess these are okay because it's like a sweet, and it's not something that people directly like connect to, like the meat and like gravy, you know, like the stuff that's just animal centered. So that's a great way to kind of sneak something in there that people are going to like at a potluck, and that you know that you can have. And then another thing that I would do is, if you have, you know, in a potluck scenario, typically everybody's bringing a dish. So if you have a close friend or a family member or whoever, and maybe they prep something that's already kind of like almost vegan, it's a great chance to like reach out and be like, hey, I know every year you make that salad. I love that salad, but like you use honey in your dressing. Could you switch that for maple syrup? It tastes the same, but then I can eat it, and I really want to like eat that with you. And chances are most people are like, you know, maple syrup, honey, right? Like there's such small things, such small shifts that and people may be willing to just tweak that a little bit for you. So you do have other options, but it's not really inconveniencing anybody, right? Like maple syrup is anywhere. And, you know, just think about what people bring. If there's a typical dish, if there's a typical thing, and reach out to those that might be willing to make small tweaks. And that would be really easy and not have to kind of like go further than that to make it work. So before we get into kind of like the hosting and like you're doing your own thing, I think it's also important to just kind of talk about being prepared, because not only is there like the food aspect, there's going to be the whole conversation aspect. There's going to be questions concerns. A lot of times people will ask questions out of, genuine concern or interest or misunderstanding, right? And they're worried about, like, where are you going to get your protein? And are you going to get enough nutrients? And, oh, you're looking really thin. Are you eating enough, right? Like, there's going to be things that come up, and just be prepared for that, right? Expect that and know that it's not coming from like a bad place. And I think a lot of people, it can be really overwhelming to like get those questions in the beginning, and you don't know what to say. So it's good to kind of just be aware and have a few things like in your back pocket, some go-to responses. And if you don't know something, that's okay. You can say, Uncle Daryl, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that question, but I'll find out and I'll get back to you, right? Like, I'll tell you at Christmas time. Don't worry, right? Whatever that is, and it gives you a chance to kind of have those conversations, and also allows people to like know, like, this is a normal thing. It's okay, and they're learning, and it normalizes it kind of in their life, and it gives them some exposure and some comfort, and that allows people to get more comfortable with it and the idea. And as people start to get more comfortable with the idea, they're more interested in being accommodating or going that extra mile to make sure that you have something or trying something that you're bringing. So just be prepared, like, mentally to answer those questions, and to, you're going to have those bad jokes like, my food eats your food, and how do you know someone's vegan? They'll tell you, right? Things like that. You're going to get them. They're such easy go-tos, right? People just can't not make them. So expect them, prepare yourself, and don't take it personally. Okay, so one thing that I think, we get so caught up in like tradition, and it's like, well, my family's always done it this way, and so I have to keep doing it this way, and we can't divert. And it's okay to like make new traditions. I really stumbled on that. Hang on, get some water here. Okay, new traditions. I said it. Okay. Right, like, there's no shame in saying like, what I used to do doesn't serve me the same, and this is better, like, this is upgraded, this is different, and I want to do something different. And whether that's taking Thanksgiving away from a meal, maybe you go out and you visit an animal sanctuary for the day, or you go to the pumpkin patch and you like pick pumpkins and do something else to kind of make it special and to have that family time, right? Like, that's an option if you feel that a meal is overwhelming in the beginning, right? Like, you can do something new and kind of pull it in a different direction. And I'm not saying that you have to do that. I go everywhere for Thanksgiving. I don't have an issue. We also do like our own kind of family Thanksgiving, and I prepare a lot of food. It's ridiculous, right? Like, we eat for a week and there's only the four of us, right? Like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I feel like I need to do it, and I enjoy doing that. So you can kind of pick and choose what you want to do and how you want to handle that, but don't be afraid to just try something new. And just because you did something new one year doesn't mean you have to keep doing it, right? Like, make new traditions, upgrade old ones, and feel comfortable doing that. Okay, so now I'm going to move into hosting. And hosting is harder, and there's all these different aspects that come into play. And, there's not going to be one right answer. So, for example, in our family here, in my house, 2 of us are vegan, 2 of us aren't. And so when I first went vegan, it was just me. And I would just make those sides and everything for me, and my husband would prep the meat and do that stuff, right? Like, they still have the traditional foods, and I would just have my stuff. And then that kind of started to grow and evolve to the point of everything was kind of my stuff. And we only really would have meat if we were hosting. And personally, I'd prefer to not have meat. I don't prep it. But that would be a better option, like, in my eyes. So the last time we did something, I don't know if it was Christmas, if it was Thanksgiving, something like that. I prepared like a whole meal, all vegan, and my husband really wanted to make sure that there was chicken. And that was really frustrating to me. It was upsetting to me, to be honest. And I felt like it really took away from my meal and what I was doing. So, fine, because he's not vegan. And so that's where like that you got to kind of compromise and have some balance. And his family's not vegan, they're over here, and he felt like accommodating them was providing meat. And in my view, that's not accommodation. Accommodating is someone has an allergy, and you give them a food free of that. Accommodating is someone saying, okay, I'm doing like the keto diet, and you're giving them a low carb option. So, there's a different idea of what accommodation is. And so he grabbed a pack of chicken breast, but then he grabbed two, and maybe it was silly, but I was mad. And it was like, it's one thing to accommodate people. It's another thing to give a whole second set of chicken breast that's already not needed, just in case they might want the convenience of having a second. And it almost like invalidated my meal. It's like, I've prepared a full meal with all these vegan options. Everything's good. But when you like add in all the meat, it's now the star of the show. And if you're providing all this meat, you're saying like, here's what you're here for, and like this other stuff is optional. He returned the pack, which worked for us, which was good. I didn't make him do it. He just kind of recognized like, okay, I pushed it too far. And the family came over. The meal was good. They had lots of, like I said, I overdo it. I cooked so many vegan options, right? Like they had some of it all. They had their one chicken breast. It was fine, right? Like it all went well. If this was an all vegan household, I would not include that meat in host. And I think that's like the hard thing, is you got to know your family dynamic. And a lot of us, there might be one vegan in the family, and a lot of us are women, and it might be that your husband, he still eats meat. He wants his turkey, he wants his ham, he wants his, and the family expects it. And you kind of got to find that balance. And I think one of the best things to do, at least in the beginning, is to do all the sides vegan. And if, that's your tradition and you're not able to get out of that, and you need to cook a turkey because that's what the husband wants, that's what the kids expect, and that's what the family expects, then, maybe you keep doing that until you get to a point where it doesn't make sense anymore. And there was a point for me when I first went vegan where I was still preparing animal products for everybody. And it kind of got to a point where it was like, if you want them, you can prepare them. And then that came kind of further of like, they didn't prepare them. It was just that we eat vegan meals, and that's how we eat at home. And so you got to kind of find that balance of like what works for you and what works for your family. And if your family was all vegan, like I would not buy meat for them, right? Like that's me, but that's not necessarily you. And I think that's really important to differentiate. Like, just because I would do something doesn't mean that you have to do it that way. But the way that I look at it is that it's more the concept. It's not that the meal is insufficient. It's just the idea that the meal's insufficient without the meat. And when you provide it to them, you're supporting that idea and that concept. And it's one meal, right? Like, people can come to your house and have a good plant-based meal, right? Like, you don't need to buy tofurkey. You don't need to get those processed products that you think they're going to turn their nose up at if they don't. Like mock meats, right? For somebody that wants a turkey, maybe a mock meat is a good option, or maybe it isn't. You're going to kind of know your family and provide that. But like, there's so many good options, right? There's amazing vegan pumpkin pies and like vegan whipped creams. Like, you can have a lot of those really familiar foods that are really good, and make them vegan and kind of host that way and give them that exposure. So that's at least how I look at it. I'm just going to see what Hope is saying. So she's saying that they've done a soup bar, which was fun. 2 or 3 soups to pick from, and muffins, breads, and sandwich filling salads and desserts. She always hosts some people who come eat vegan. It's only her sister-in-law and her best friend, and they're both totally fine with a vegan meal. And I think that's awesome. And a lot of families will get to that point where they are okay with that vegan meal. And this is something even with our wedding. I remember, kind of sitting down with my husband and saying, do we have to serve meat? Because I don't want to. And that's the reality. And it becomes like part of, I know I've talked before about like voting with your dollar and putting that money towards buying a bunch of meat for people that I don't like, that's not good for them. I don't support the industry. And that was really frustrating, and trying to like balance that dynamic, because like I said, my husband's not vegan. And if he was, we wouldn't have even been having the conversation. It wouldn't have even been a consideration. But because he was, we did have to have that conversation. And with our original plan, he had said like, yeah, fine, let's do vegan. They can deal with it. And if they're unhappy, they can go to McDonald's later, or they can do whatever. It's one meal, it's our day. And so we had connected with a vegan caterer, and we're going to have it all set up and done that way. And then like our venue backed out a month before the wedding. And so I had to kind of completely like reinvent everything and start a new plan and find a new place. And so we ended up at a resort. They didn't even have a vegan option on the menu, which was frustrating and kind of changed things. So for my wedding, for example, they had chicken, and the venue created a vegan option for me and my vegan friends. And it was something that was so important to me that we had a good vegan option, because so often you'll go somewhere and they'll go, yeah, no problem. Here's eggplant parmesan without the parmesan, and it's like 20 calories and you're hungry. And I was like that's not acceptable, and I'm not willing to do that. So I think it's really important when you have an opportunity to like be vocal and request those vegan options and kind of bring them forward, and make people aware of them, and that they're good, and that they're wanted. It's a good thing to do. So each family, like I said, is going to be different, and everybody's at a different place. And if you're single and you're hosting Thanksgiving and you're vegan, then go for the vegan thing. Or if your family's vegan, like go for it. Or if they're not all vegan and they're going to support you, I say go for that, because people can learn, right? Like, and it's going to really be up to you and your family dynamic. And some are going to push harder than others. And it's not really about the food, right? It's more about the concept and the idea that they, it's more about what society has told them, right? Like that they're supposed to say and they're supposed to react. And another like prime example of this is before our wedding, we had the wedding party over here for like a barbecue. And, there was veggie burgers and beef burgers, and all the sides and stuff were vegan. The mayo was vegan, like everything else was vegan. And I made a chickpea salad. It was a big hit. People were like, oh yeah, this is great. Got all these compliments on it. But there was also a tofu egg salad. And my husband had said the word tofu, and it just like rippled through the backyard. Everybody's like, ugh, tofu. Ugh. Nobody tried it. Except of course, like my couple vegan friends that were there, right, from the wedding party. And I got a lot of compliments, like, oh, you gotta tell me how you make this. And like, it's something that my husband's taken to work, and like the guys have tried and they really liked it. But the idea of it being tofu, people wouldn't even touch it. But the other vegan salad, there was chickpeas. They were like, oh yeah, like that was good. And they kept coming over and complimenting me. So much of it's like mindset focus and mindset surrounded. So I wouldn't, there's like this idea of like, well, what will we eat? How can we accommodate them? And they don't necessarily need to be accommodated as far as meat. So you got to work out what makes sense for your family, your dynamics. And if you have questions, like I said, surrounding it, or maybe you have a dynamic that seems a little weird, or you're not sure like how to piece it together, then like let me know. I'm happy to give you suggestions or talk through that, because everybody is so different. And these family events, they're hard sometimes, right? Like they're emotional. People sometimes take it very personally if you're not willing to eat the meal that they've cooked, or people can see it even as insulting that you've not accommodated the guest, right? Like that you're not like accommodating them by buying a turkey and like stuffing it and cooking it. But I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not putting my hand up a turkey's butt. I'm not prepping a turkey for people. So you kind of got to go with what feels good for you and your family. So the last thing that I'll leave you with is, as a last resort, don't go, don't host. And I know that that's not ideal, and maybe that's not a long-term solution, but if it's very new to you and you're just not comfortable, and it's very new to the family and they're not supportive and they're really negative about it, and you just don't feel good, don't go. That's a valid choice, right? You need to protect like you, like mentally, physically, especially right now with COVID and everything that's happening. And that's a valid choice to kind of put you first and make that choice to not subject yourself to a scenario if you know that it's not good and that everybody just needs a little bit of time. Sorry, I just see what Cheryl's saying. She's not vegan, but she's okay if I walk into a vegan dinner. She's learning right now, one day we'll switch. I've not been a meat fan, but do eat chicken and beef at times. When I go with the family dinner, they are aware I prefer no meat, but I'm okay either way for now. Thanks for sharing. You're welcome, Cheryl. Yeah, and I think that's like it's okay to do that transitional period, and sometimes that's helpful for people and for families to kind of see that transitional period. But when it becomes, I don't want to say a hard fast line, right? Like there becomes a point where you can't, right? Like you don't want to, and you know that you feel better eating another way, or you've learned more and more about the reasons to not eat meat, and you just can't justify it, and it gets very hard to kind of get out of that and be able to say to people like, I love that you've prepped this. This is amazing. I'm going to stick with the sides, or I can bring my own thing. And it's just an adjustment. And the holidays are like a heated and an emotional time, and there's so much surrounding it. So it's okay to not do everything perfectly. It's okay to make a mistake. It's okay if you eat the wrong thing. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have all the answers, and you can figure it out and navigate this process and like the world, right? Like you're not expected to go into